Oh hey, didn't see you there. It's time to evaluate. So, as I just told you, it's time to evaluate. Last time we checked up on all the feedback I could get about this product from a variety of different sources. Now that I've got the information I may need for this product to be evaluated, that's what I'm going to do now. I aim to evaluate its strengths and its weaknesses alongside all different areas that I could iterate the model to create a much better, an even better model product to sell and to just make. So I guess I've got to go into that right now.
Now, with the current scene clock, I wanted to quickly go into the strengths and weakness of it, with many of the strengths being the fact that it's sturdy and balanced, the frame has enough space for any other components if it needs more components to be fit inside, it has an incredibly smooth finish and appealing design, and it has an aesthetic that can simultaneously draw in moderate interest while not standing it out too much. The product can be reprogrammed and rearranged at any time thanks to use of the Raspberry Pi, as well as a back that can be screwed off and on. All cables and circuit boards are kept firmly in place, same as the horns on either side. The left horn can rotate with ease but will stop firmly once it has reached that final angle. It can be powered by long cables used in many different locations, and emphasizes the theme of memory excellently, with the flow of the logo into the stands having a much more balanced design with everything flowing perfectly into each other. Now, of course, with certain strengths come certain weaknesses. For example, the product has no current safety features for itself, where, for example, heat isn't a huge issue in safety, but water damage will pretty much break the product immediately, as there is nothing stopping water from getting in with the current design, and then it will ruin all the circuitry. The right horn/stand is not built properly, with the entire pin being a tad too small for the drill hole, and thus the entire horn will rotate completely instead of being locked in place, with the actual horn itself also being super stiff and not being able to rotate with ease, combining to make it so that the right horn barely works at all. The horns can only rotate between two different angles and not even a large angle either, so there's practically no difference between keeping it upright and standing vertically. The PLA is rather expensive, £40.42 for the 90-meter roll. The product overall is rather expensive due to the circuitry is alongside this, with the Raspberry Pi costing around £35 and the monitor costing around £36, already reaching £71, which has surpassed the average amount of money people would be willing to spend on this. Not only that, but due to the above mentioned circuitry, the product will also end up being a little bit bulky, with many people seeming to find the product would be better with thinner horns and a larger screen to frame ratio. Now that I calculated the strengths and weaknesses, another quick thing I wanted to do before evaluating the final design is properly think about the cost of the product. So I looked into every piece of hardware I had, with the Electrum HDMI monitor, Raspberry Pi, USB-C cable to power the product, a ribbon HDMI cable, a few other cables that came with the Electrum monitor, all costing around £95 for manufacturing when you add the cost of the entire frame printed from stainless steel PLA, which is £18. Now this is quite a bit more than the predicted price range people would pay for, but not too much, and with a profit margin added on alongside the cost of man hours to programming, however, the selling price may end up being quite a bit more. Now, since I'd already gone through the strengths and weaknesses of the proof of concept software, I also wanted to go through the strengths and weaknesses of the ideal software. However, due to the nature of it being an ideal software, it was kind of difficult to take any strengths and weaknesses from it, as there's no way of knowing how it would function in real life. However, instead I looked into a lot more detailed information about how much the product would cost again, with two forms of storage being in the device. The hardware storage, which will take in the randomized selection of all your family's photos and present it on the frame, and your own personal cloud storage that comes with your account/device. Now, since we only need an average of a 1440 picture library, with, let's say, add a few more in there for variety, let's bring it up to 1500. So when looking at cloud storage in general, we found that I looked at two different examples, those being iDrive's free plan and Google Cloud, and I saw that even with Google Cloud, 10 gigabytes is probably the maximum amount of storage you'll need, and you can get that for £2 a month using Google Cloud, so I think it's perfectly feasible to use cloud storage, bringing the total price of up around to £95 for the product and £2 a year with cloud storage. Now, when it comes to man hours, obviously I wouldn't be able to tell how much that would take for the actual ideal software because, well, it hasn't been made. It's an idealized software, and the proof of concept wouldn't sell as software, so I can't use that. However, I feel like a fair estimate for evaluation, I'll be treating it as around £120 for the sensor evaluation. Now when it comes to evaluating the actual product, I will be using the Ideal software, and I should quickly remind you about the scoring out of 10. I'm going to be using the design criteria we saw before with Paloma, and anything below a 5 is a negative score. It doesn't perform this criteria well. A 5 is an average score, so it's neutral at passing it. 6 to a 7 is it gets the job done. 8 to a 9 is it does it really well. 10 means it goes above and beyond. Now that being said, my rating for each of these scores can be seen as follows, and if you want further information you can look at the table on the website, but I had a very similar ending score to Paloma, that being 78 out of 90 compared to her 76 out of 90. This is super good for me as it shows my product is succeeding in fulfilling its function while still being safe/accessible to the general populace. And I found that the biggest issue was the price, as I felt that this could be a bigger issue now that I had finally calculated that the total price would be around £120. Now that I'd evaluated all of my design, I needed to start thinking about how to improve this product in the future. And I did this for a variety of reasons. For example, I thought of a bunch of things I could do with the current design, and I listed out these problems as you can see here. And after that, I began to fix those problems, starting with immediate solutions to the physical design, with ideas such as 3D printing holes on each sides for the left and right horn, making the screen proportions accurate, getting a 70% screen to a 30% frame ratio, where I could use like a 7-inch HDMI display. When it comes to improving the actual physical design, I thought about adding some customization with the horns by allowing them in different colors, as you can see here. And I also figured we could have some way to make the pins / the horns removable, so you could move them about a bit more. So in this way you could flip the horns upside down and then have the product hanging, for example, to add more customization and accessibility in its location usage. Obviously there are more improvements to be made that I talk about later, but I'm just going through the highlights in my opinion. And when it comes to materials, I started thinking more about what photo frames would be for, and there's a surprising lack of information about digital photo frames in particular on the internet. So I used a lot of classic photo frame available technology and what I could interpolate from the information I could manage to get, and figured that in terms of materials, I found that metal and clean plastic would probably work best as a product, as a photo frame. And for me, I really like the idea of metal from the start, as I feel like it gives that modern look that really adds to the technological side of it. And I believe that metal photo frames are the ones that sell the most. Now, when I looked at a few metals to use, specifically silver, bronze, and aluminium, and by far the most superior metal to use was aluminium, where it's lightweight, available at the Earth's surface, gives a nice clean aesthetic, and is resistant to corrosion, especially when you apply a process, which I will go into now in the manufacturing. When it comes to the manufacturing of the product, I talked about using the metal aluminium, as it can have an easy finish to make the product much more durable, by either anodizing it or powder coating it, which will go much into heavy detail about the process and the advantages and the disadvantages of both when it comes to product. But at the end of the day, the product doesn't need to be flashy. The goal is to be durable and long lasting, so I think that's important when it comes to deciding which process to go with. Although I do believe aluminium is definitely the way, as it also means I can build the whole thing out of aluminium through a variety of processes. For example, the extrusion process detailed here. And because I can build the horns out of aluminium, because we can dye the aluminium in the anodizing and powder coating process, it means that we can have a much more cheaper facility overall, as we don't have to have multiple different machinery operating at an industrial level. When it came to types of manufacturing processes, I felt it was best to either look into repetitive manufacturing processes or a discrete manufacturing process if I do include different colors. I also looked into how LCD screens were created, and also the general components you would need to power a digital photo frame, to see how much space I could save, and I found I could get rid of a lot of space by having it all on one motherboard, as opposed to attaching a whole Raspberry Pi and a monitor, because I only really need the photo frame to do one function, and that's the scene clock function. So there are a huge amount of unnecessary things running in the background of the Raspberry Pi that distracts from the actual program. Speaking of the program, when it comes to improving the software, obviously it's an idealized software, but I had a few ideas of how to improve it. For example, a priority system in the family system, where you could prioritize certain users' images to come up more often, and by an extension of that, you could prioritize newer images over older images. For example, in situations where an uncle, let's say like with my second primary user, Andrew Vivas, had a new kid, you'd want to see his newer photos more often so you could set a priority to him. There's also a few other ideas which go into more detail with the actual website once more. Having talked about the manufacturing process and the materials used, I now needed to think about sustainability. And ironically enough, 3D printing actually might have been a better method when it comes to sustainability, as it only uses 100% of the material it needs and produces no waste, unlike nearly every other manufacturing process there is. Despite this, a big issue when it comes to sustainability with my product is the power consumption it has, and I found a variety of sources, most interestingly enough being this data, which was taken from 5 photo frames, one of which was actually one I'd looked at earlier. And since this was super helpful, as it tested the photo frames when they were running 13 hours a day for the entire week, which is the closest I could find to my actual product, which hypothetically would be working 24 hours. Now I see that it's going to be a huge power consumption, which is the biggest sustainable issue for me, and to fix this, one of the best ways is to just get the screen to go more into idle mode, which is a bit more difficult considering my product's function is to be active at all times. So I looked into a few more methods to figure out which one would be best, and here are a few of them now. Now obviously with any of these solutions I chose, you would also have the option to manually turn the screen on or off. Finally, when it comes to the marketing of the product, I think that this is potentially the best opportunity for it, as given current circumstances and the fact that the digital photo frame industry is booming, this is the best opportunity to sell a digital photo frame and to sell something that could help you share and connect with your family abroad, family who are stuck in other places, family who could do with seeing your memories and your day-to-day life. I've also thought about when it comes to marketing, I need the product to be shown as affordable and put an emphasis on the theme of sharing memories for now. I also thought that in terms of drawing users in, perhaps more range and customization could be seen, i.e. the different color tones available as well as swapping them in and out, as you can see here again.
With that final piece of evaluation being totally complete, I'm done. I've thought up a product, I've created that product, I've evaluated and further evolved upon that product. I've got loads of different people's opinions on it, I've got loads of different reflection on it, I've got all sorts of images of it, and I've got all sorts of ideas about how it could work and how it could be improved that I've described throughout this video. Throughout this whole video series, in fact, I'm pretty much done. All I've got left to do is to reflect on what's actually been done, and that's what will happen when I see you next time in the final episode. Let's go.